Hello, listeners. Welcome to Reading with Clint Sensei. Today we're going to be looking at a story from Hans Christian Andersen, one of the most notable fairy tale creators from the West. He's up there with the Grimm brothers, but different than the Grimm brothers, who collected fairy tales that were already being told around campfires and recorded them for us to read today. Hans Christian Andersen created his own fairy tales, and they were a little different than what we have come to know as fairy tales, as they don't always have that happily ever after ending, and the settings do not always include princesses and princes and castles, although today's story does include an emperor. He's been very influential on many more modern writers. Now, the story we're reading today is more than 200 years old, but the lessons we can take from that are still something we can use. It doesn't matter the age. We can still use the lessons from his stories. So, today's reading is going to be a little different. I'm not just reading the story to you. I'm going to be examining the story with you and teaching you to use reading comprehension strategies and giving you time to pause and think about answers, and also showing you some of what I think as a good reader should do to be aware of their own thinking during the story. So if you like this story and you like the format that it's presented in, please subscribe and look for more stories in the future. There will be a worksheet and a link to the text under the video so you can read along with the story as well. So before we look at the story, it's always important to have a time to think about the story, some background information about the story or an application for the story. So in this case, I want you to think, have you ever done something or pretended to like something just because it was popular? Go ahead, take a moment, think about it. You can pause if you want to. There's a lot of trends today, a lot of them on social media, both for adults and kids. So they can be phrases, they can be actions. I know over the last 10 years, social media has given us so many trends, and a lot of them people do in spite of the dangers that could be involved. I'm thinking of a lot of the TikTok challenges, being that it's one of the most popular platforms among young people today. Things like the water bucket challenge, the Tide Pod challenge, and so on and so forth. Now, when you do those things because they're popular, how did it make you feel? Whatever activity you thought of, how did it make you feel to do it? That's what we're going to be looking at in our story today. So, the story we're reading today is The Emperor's New Clothes. And for those of you who don't know, emperor is similar to a king in that they rule over a large empire which is usually made of multiple kingdoms or countries put together. Currently, there is no empire or emperor in the world today, but in the past there have been many. So, the emperor's new clothes. Many years ago, there was an emperor who was so excessively fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on them. He cared nothing about his soldiers, nor for the theater, nor for driving in the woods except for the sake of showing off his new clothes. He had a costume for every hour in the day. Instead of saying, as one does about any other king or emperor, he is in his council chamber, the people here always said, the emperor is in his dressing room. So here, just at the beginning of the story, we already have some exposition about the emperor telling us about his personality. He really likes clothes. He's excessively fond, and excessively is a word that means too much of something. So he's excessively fond of new clothes. He likes new clothes too much. And instead of doing his job, which is being in his council chambers, he's always in his dressing room. Life was very gay in the great town where he lived. And this story is older, like I said, about 200 years old. So the word gay means happy. So life was very happy in the great town where he lived. Hosts of strangers came to visit it every day, and among them one day were two swindlers. Now, swindlers is a good vocabulary word. Swindlers are people, well, a swindler is a person who is trying to get money from you for something by selling something that is not true or that does not exist. I will put a vocabulary word and definition on the screen for you to see. Hosts of strangers came to visit it every day, and among them one day were two swindlers. They gave themselves out as weavers, and said that they knew how to weave the most beautiful fabrics imaginable. Not only were the colors and patterns unusually fine, but the clothes that were made of this cloth had the peculiar quality of becoming invisible to every person who was not fit for the office he held, or who was impossibly dull or boring. Those must be splendid clothes, thought the emperor. By wearing them, I should be able to discover which men in my kingdom are unfit for their posts. I shall distinguish the wise men from the fools. Yes, I certainly must order some of that stuff to be woven for me. The emperor paid the two swindlers a lot of money in advance, so that they might begin their work at once. And here we already see a mistake. The emperor paid the two swindlers a lot of money in advance. Paying anybody all of the money in advance for a job that they're supposed to do is usually not a smart decision. They did put up two looms and pretended to weave, but they had nothing whatever upon their shuttles. At the outset, they asked for a quantity of the finest silk and the purest gold thread, all of which they put into their own bags while they worked away at the empty looms far into the night. Now we have some things that you might not be familiar with, looms and weaving with shuttles. The loom is this machine in the picture that we used to use to make cloth. This would be something that now is done by machines usually. Some people still use looms to make homemade things, and it's very interesting to see them work. But the shuttle is the piece that they are passing through from one end to the other. So you can look at the illustration there. And it said, they asked for the finest silk and purest gold thread. And what did they do with all of that? They put it into their own bags while they worked away at the empty looms far into the night. So they are stealing it. I should like to know how those weavers are getting on with their cloth, thought the emperor. But he felt a little queer or strange when he reflected that anyone who was stupid or unfit for his post would not be able to see it. He certainly thought that he need have no fears for himself, but still he thought he would send somebody else first to see how it was getting on. Everybody in the town knew what wonderful power the stuff possessed, and everyone was anxious to see how stupid his neighbor was. So we can see from this that news has already traveled throughout his town that the weavers are making a special outfit for the emperor that people who are not smart cannot see, or if they're unfit for their jobs, they cannot see. But the emperor is very arrogant, which means he's very proud, and he thinks, for sure, I can see it. But maybe I should test someone else. I will send my faithful old minister to the weavers, thought the emperor. He will be best able to see how the stuff looks, for he is a clever man, and no one fulfills his duties better than he does. So the good old minister went into the room where the two swindlers sat working at the empty loom. Heaven help us, thought the old minister, opening his eyes very wide. Why can't I see a thing? Now, let's make a prediction. What do you think the minister is going to do? He's supposed to be a good and wise old minister. He's worked for the emperor for many years. And now he's looking and he sees nothing there. What do you think he's going to do? Take a moment and think of an answer. Now let's see what he does. But he took care not to say so. Both the swindlers begged him to be good enough to step a little nearer, and asked if he did not think it did a good pattern and beautiful coloring. They pointed to the empty loom. The poor old minister stared as hard as he could, but he could not see anything, for of course there was nothing to see. Good heavens, thought he, is it possible that I am a fool? I have never thought so, and nobody must know it. Am I not fit for my post? It will never do to say that I cannot see the stuff. Now we have a little more there. Hearing him think that, does that change your prediction? Well, sir, you don't say anything about the stuff, said the one who was pretending to weave, throwing the shuttle back and forth. Oh, it is beautiful, quite charming, said the minister, looking through his spectacles, his glasses. Such a pattern, and such colors! I will certainly tell the emperor that the stuff pleases me very much. Did that match your prediction? He's pretending to see everything. And he's going to tell the emperor that he could see it and that it was very beautiful. "We are delighted to hear you say so," said the swindlers, and then they named all the colors and described the peculiar pattern. The old minister paid great attention to what they said, so as to be able to repeat it when he got home to the emperor. So he's going to remember the lies they are telling him in order to be able to tell the emperor the same thing. Then the swindlers went on to demand more money, more silk, and more gold to be able to proceed with the weaving. But they put it all in their own pockets. Not a single strand was ever put into the loom. But they went on as before, weaving at the empty loom. The emperor soon sent another faithful official to see how the stuff was getting on, and if it would soon be ready. The same thing happened to him as to the minister. He looked and looked, but as there was only the empty loom, he could see nothing at all. "Is this not a beautiful piece of stuff?" said both the swindlers, showing and explaining the beautiful pattern and colors which were not there to be seen. "I know I am no fool," thought the man. "So it must be that I am unfit for my good post. It is very strange, though. However, one must not let it appear so." So he praised the stuff he did not see and assured them of his delight in the beautiful colors and the originality of the design. "It is absolutely charming," he said to the emperor. Everybody in the town was talking about this splendid stuff. Now, the emperor thought he would like to see it while it was still on the loom. So, accompanied by a number of selected courtiers, among whom were the two faithful officials who had already seen the imaginary stuff, he went to visit the crafty impostors, who were working away as hard as ever they could at the empty loom. Now, let's make another prediction. What do you think the emperor is going to do when he goes to this room to see the empty loom? What is his reaction going to be? And he's bringing a lot of people with him. Think about your answers a little bit. "It is magnificent," said both the honest officials. "Only see, your Majesty, what a design! What colors!" And they pointed to the empty loom, for they each thought, no doubt, the others could see the stuff. Hmm. Now, let's see the emperor's reaction and see if it matches your prediction. "What?" thought the emperor. "I see nothing at all. This is terrible. Am I a fool? Am I not fit to be emperor? Why, nothing worse could happen to me." "Oh, it is beautiful," said the emperor. "It has my highest approval." And he nodded his satisfaction as he gazed at the empty loom. Nothing would induce him to say that he could not see anything. Did that fit your prediction? It's okay if it didn't. Predicting means we're making the best guess to what we think could happen from what we see in our story. So it's okay if your prediction doesn't match, and it's a good job if it does. It just means that you're thinking. So we know so far, everybody that has gone to look at the cloth pretends that it's very beautiful. But since we're reading the story, we know they're all pretending. But each of them think that everybody else can see it and that they're the only ones who cannot. And because they're pretending, they're fooling everyone else around them. And they're letting the swindlers swindle them. They're letting the swindlers trick the emperor out of his money and silk. The whole suite gazed and gazed. That means to look for a long time. Gazed and gazed, but saw nothing more than all the others. However, they all exclaimed with His Majesty, "It is very beautiful! It is very beautiful!" And they advised him to wear a suit made of this wonderful cloth on the occasion of a great procession which was just about to take place. A procession is kind of like a parade, has a lot of people marching in a long line. Magnificent! Gorgeous! Excellent! Went from mouth to mouth. They were all equally delighted with it. Delighted is very happy. The emperor gave each of the rogues an order of knighthood to be worn in their buttonholes, and the title of gentleman weaver. So rogues are the people who are the swindlers who tricked the people. Rogues are not good people. It's another word for bad guys. The swindlers sat up the whole night before the day on which the procession was to take place, burning 16 candles, so that people might see how anxious they were to get the new emperor's new clothes ready. They pretended to take the stuff off the loom. They cut it out in the air with a huge pair of scissors, and they stitched away with needles without any thread in them. At last they said, "Now the emperor's new clothes are ready." So they're really putting on a good show the whole time and pretending like they're working so hard. Maybe you've done some play pretend yourself, and it's something like that. Or maybe you play the air guitar, pretending like you're playing music. They're doing the same, but everyone else believes that it's true. The emperor, with his grandest courtiers, went to them himself, and both swindlers raised one arm in the air as if they were holding something. They said, "See, these are the trousers, this is the coat, and here is the mantle," and so on. It is as light as a spider's web. One might think one had nothing on, but that is the very beauty of it. So they're keeping the lie going. It's as light as a spider's web. You might think you don't have anything on. That way, the people have to keep pretending, and the emperor has to keep pretending that he can see it, and he, even if it doesn't feel like it's there, it's actually there because it's so light and feels like nothing's on. "Will your imperial majesty be graciously pleased to take off your clothes?" said the impostors. "Then we may put on the new ones, along here before the great mirror." The emperor took off all his clothes, and the impostors, the pretenders, pretended to give him one article of dress after the other of the new ones, which they had pretended to make. They pretended to fasten something around his waist and to tie on something. This was the train, and the emperor turned round and round in front of the mirror. "How well His Majesty looks in the new clothes! How becoming they are!" cried all the people around. "What a design! And what colors! They are the most gorgeous robes. The canopy is waiting outside, which is to be carried over your majesty in the procession, said the master of ceremonies, which is a MC. Well, I am quite ready, said the emperor. Don't the clothes fit well? Then he turned round again in front of the mirror, so that he should seem to be looking at his grand things. The chamberlains, those are the people who work for the king and take care of everything in his room and his clothes, who were to carry the train. That's a train in this case is a very long piece of cloth that goes from the neck and goes all the way down along the ground, and they have to hold it up so it doesn't get dirty. The chamberlains who were to carry the train stooped and pretended to lift it from the ground with both hands, and they walked along with their hands in the air. They dared not let it appear that they could not see anything. Then the emperor walked along in the procession under the gorgeous canopy, and everybody in the streets and at the windows exclaimed, "How beautiful the emperor's new clothes are! What a splendid train! And they fit to perfection!" Nobody would let it appear that he could see nothing, for then he would not be fit for his post, or else he was a fool. So, nobody so far is acknowledging that they cannot see these invisible clothes. They're all pretending that they can see it and that they're very beautiful. Everybody in the town, because nobody wants to appear stupid. You remember the question I asked you at the beginning? All these people are doing the same thing, and it's not the smart thing. And how do they feel? They feel, how do you think they feel? None of the emperor's clothes had been so successful before. "But he has got nothing on," said a little child. What do you think people's reactions are going to be now? Can you make a prediction about that? A child has said, the first person in the whole story who said, "There's nothing there. The emperor has no clothes on." "Oh, listen to the innocent," said its father. And one person whispered to the other what the child had said. "He has nothing on. A child says he has nothing on." "But he has nothing on. He has nothing on," at last cried all the people. So it just takes one person telling the truth, standing up for something to make a difference, as we're seeing here. Just the child was the first one, and then everybody else picked up on what the child said. They didn't have to pretend anymore, except for the emperor. The emperor writhed. That means he was twisting and turning there, for he knew it was true. But he thought, the procession must go on now. So he held himself stiffer, straighter than ever, and the chamberlains held up the invisible train. And that's the end of the story. So, we have the emperor, even at the end, he couldn't quit pretending because of what he looked like a fool for everything he had been doing the whole time. Why did it take a child to tell the truth? Think about that. We had the king's most faithful counselor that went first, and then another one of his officers that went and looked, and the emperor himself, and all of the people around him, and all of the townspeople. And everyone said the clothes were beautiful. The fabric was wonderful. It fit the emperor so well. And then a child had to be the first one. Why do you think so? I think it's because the child wasn't scared of looking like a fool. The bigger you are, the older you get, maybe you're worried about how other people think of you. But here the child was not. He didn't care if people thought he was a fool. Now, let's take this story and make a connection to the modern world, to things today. This story was set back in the times of emperors. And today, we don't have emperors, but we have big groups of people who tell you things. And there's still swindlers out there today trying to trick people, trying to get money from people, or just make people do things that they want them to do. And we get a lot of viral trends. And I'm sure you guys have heard of viral trends. Things, it might just be a saying like skibbity or 6-7. And those ones are fun to say. And those are silly. Those are not going to hurt people. But there's other viral trends that could hurt people. So what can you apply from the story to those trends? Are you going to be like the emperor, who was very foolish and wasted and lost all of his money and gold and silk and let everyone see him naked just to pretend that he had beautiful clothes? Or are you going to be like the child who realized, I don't have to be afraid of this because I know the truth. I can say the emperor has no clothes. So maybe in the comments, you can write one way and tell me, how have you been like the child in the story where you told other people the truth when everybody was believing a lie? And you told the truth. Or maybe you're thinking of a way you might be able to stand up for the truth. So I will post a small worksheet and the story in the description under the video. Please read along, and if you want to answer any of the questions yourself in the comments, I would love to read those. Thank you.